Hello, listeners. Welcome to episode 25 of the Putting Couch, brought to you by the Seymour Putter Company's tour team. I'm Jim Grundberg, along with Cody Hale and Ted Galena. And our guest today is our regular contributor, Dr. Bob Winters, one of the renowned sports psychologists in the world, and really with a great focus on golf, a member of the David Ledbetter Teaching Academy. And Dr. Bob, it's always great to have you on. And today we wanted to talk with you about, of course, putting and the expectations that different levels of players have for their putting. And we always enjoy getting into really in-depth conversations with you about this. And right now, golfers have a chance to sort of reflect on what they want to do in the coming season to improve. And you're really all about game improvement and the coaching and the mental part of the game. So first of all, welcome. And let's get into some putting conversation.
Well, it's great. I can't believe this is putting podcast number 25. I remember you and I were just sitting talking about this whole notion of the putting couch, Jim. So it's great to be on. Great to have Ted and Cody with us. So let's just talk a little bit about expectations, because expectations are really sort of a driving force to golf. Everyone expects to play well. Everybody wants to go out and play well. But expectations in putting, that's sort of kind of a different animal, because there's always the anticipation of what will happen, what could happen, what I want to have happen. So let me just start this off. I think when we start talking about expectations, let's get right down to sort of these definitions. That an expectation is a belief that something or someone can or will achieve something in the future. So there's some goal-driven, goal-directed behavior there. But I happen to think that expectations, when we start talking about golf, is many times we have a preset standard of performance that says, this is what I believe will happen, or should happen, or could happen, or I really want to happen. And there's a lot right there in that statement, because when their results don't match their expectations, that's when we have frustration, anxiety, and disappointment. And so what we have to be able to do is understand really what is an expectation, and then how that separates itself from what we need to do in order to execute the putt. So there's a lot of stuff we're going to be talking about here. And if the listeners just really can even just tap into just a little bit of what we're going to talk about, it will really help them today.
That's fantastic, Doc. And I know, golfers, some golfers take a lot of lessons. Some golfers take none. Some golfers seek out information online, in magazines, through friends, and others don't so much, right? But you, as somebody with a specialty on more the mental side of the game, not to say that you're not a great golfer and golf instructor, but I know your niche has been right up front in helping people really address, things like that, the 6 inches between the ears, right? Which we always hear is going to be the difference between golfers who perform at a much higher level than somebody else who might actually have a comparable skill set physically. So when you're approached by somebody, you mentioned a junior tour player, or whether it's a club member, how do you start the conversation? How do they start the conversation? And how do you sort of decipher where you're going to go with this conversation, and what part of it is putting?
Well, I think when people come to see me and they talk about, becoming a better player, I think we really have to kind of put a stopgap on this, because I have a lot of people that say, well, I'm a really good golfer, but I don't putt really well. I'm sitting here going, well, half of the game almost is putting, and you can't differentiate yourself. And a lot of people say, well, I'm a really good putter, but I'm not that good of a player. I'm not that good of a ball striker. So I'm of the opinion is that if you want to become a total player, you've got to fall in love with all of it, but you've got to fall in love with the flat stick. I mean, that's just all there is to it. So when a player says, I really need to improve my putting, I always start off with this. I go, well, do you enjoy putting? And are you a good putter? And it'll correlate 100%. No, I'm not a good putter, and no, I don't enjoy putting. All right. And then if you say, yeah, I'm a damn good putter, I'm a great putter, and I love to putt, and I just can't wait. So you never get someone who says, yes, I'm a really good putter, but I hate putting. They don't really look at putting as a necessary evil. What I usually hear a lot of, I'm a really good streaky putter. I'm a pretty good putter, and I really love it, when I'm putting well, but I think I could do better. And I think, I want to make more. So that's really how how I began. It's just, are you good? Do you really enjoy it? So, and that just leads into a whole lot of different other answers, when I'm working with them. So if that's really what, we need to, start there, let's start there, because I think really what happens is that we get involved in this game at a very early age, even later in life. And what's the first thing we think we can do? We think we can take this straight edge on a stick called a putter, and we know we can move it back, 10 inches back, 10 inches forward, hit it relatively solid. And here's the issue, and it's sort of tied in with something in psychology called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the Dunning-Kruger effect is when a person who has low ability overestimates their abilities, but they don't even have the insight or awareness to know how bad they are. So most people, who start out in putting go, yeah, I'm a pretty good putter. I played putt and can make some putts. And they really have a high confidence level, okay? So their expectancy when they go out, they expect to make putts, and they feel pretty good about their putting. I mean, at whatever level. But as time goes on, and then we start to realize, hey, I'm not as competent or as good at this as I thought I was. And there's a whole heck of a lot to find out. And the more I'm finding out, the more it's affecting my confidence. So confidence and motivation at getting good at putting are sometimes on opposite ends of the spectrum. And when a person really goes on this venture to become more competent, and more aware of their technical skill, they will build their putting confidence belief. And I guess, sometimes ignorance is bliss in putting. So we have so many things, we even talk about expectations. But for me, I want every player I work with at whatever level to step in, to their putt, expecting that they're going to make the putt. And when you give them sort of that goal-directed behavior, they'll say, okay, that's my end goal, but what do I need to do to actually make that happen? So what we have to do then is replace that anticipatory expectation with the focus of execution, which is the putting process itself. Okay, so that's sort of really where we can start.
That's really cool. I mean, as you said, from the beginning, golfers, they sort of many golfers compartmentalize putting. And, as you said, it's either, if it's something that they just really do have an inherent gift at and they've worked at it, that they will tend to love it and probably see it as a much more important part of the game. But we know historically, there have been some of the world's great players in various generations that have sort of dismiss putting as something that is more of a necessary evil. And it sounds like, that's really something that's got to be attacked really head on. If you want to have fun in the game and you want to be somebody who achieves their maximum potential, you have to embrace putting as a critical and important part of the game that you should learn to love somehow as much as you do the other parts of the game.
Oh, there's no doubt at all. I've always said this: you either love to putt or you learn to love to putt. If you can't do either one of those two things, you'll probably be moving to tennis, okay? Because, if we think about it, historically, we talk about people like Ben Hogan. Ben Hogan put more of his emphasis later in his years on ball striking, and he really revered that as the game, the tee to the green game. And he thought, putting was sort of a different animal. And he actually almost sort of convinced himself that it was anathema, that it was something to be dreaded. He didn't really like it that much. But in all honesty, Hogan, when he was winning a lot, was putting very well. I remember I had a wonderful conversation with Sam Snead about Hogan's putting, and he was saying Hogan's always talking about his putting. He couldn't make putts. He didn't like to putt. He goes, every time I play with Hogan, he's always making putts. He goes, so what does that mean? I think that's the whole point. I think we all have sort of this self-deprecating behavior when we talk about putts. We're always saying, I'm not making enough putts. I expect to make more putts. So we always have this, I can make and I expect to make more putts. And I remember on the Shell's Wonderful World of Golf, I had Arnold Palmer, and I was watching it versus a young Gary Player. And I think Arnold Palmer was on one side talking to Gene Sarazen, and Arnold was talking about Gary Player, and he's going, wow, Gary is just making everything. He goes, if I had made half of what Gary made, it'd be unbelievable. And on the other side of the green, here was Jimmy Demaret, who was interviewing Gary Player, and Gary Player was going, well, that daggone Arnold's making everything. If I'd be making half as many putts, he goes, I'm only one down, but boy, he's making a lot of putts. So it's always, the grass is always greener, right? So we're always expecting to make more putts. So I thought that was just a classic story, because that's what happens when we go out and we play with people. We're making putts, but if we see somebody who's got a really hot hand, we're going, daggone, they're making a lot of putts. And what are they doing? What are they thinking? And they're also looking at the instrument that they're putting with, as if that's some sort of magic wand, right?
Doc, got a question for you. How do you change someone's mind if they already, and you already mentioned that they are not that good of a putter, even on the tour level stage or mid handicap or high handicapper? How do you change that golfer's mind of, yes, you are a good putter, and make them start believing in themselves? How do you do that?
Well, there's several ways. I mean, the first thing I'm asking them, what is it that you want? Where do you want to go? And do you believe that you're a good putter? If they tell me I'm not that good, I'm going, all right, what makes you think that? You give me some reasoning, give me some explanation for why you think that. And it's amazing, because many of them will be looking around and say, well, I'm not as good as this guy. I'm not as good as she is. They seem to be making more putts. And you can actually back up, those putting statistics, and they can say, well, my putting stats are this. But I'm actually looking at more sort of what I call the soft statistics. I'm looking at them and saying, okay, every time you step into a putt, do you really believe that you're going to make it? Do you believe that you're a good putter? And I said, have you ever believed in your life that you were a fantastic putter? And here is something I almost a 95% hear from everyone. When I was younger, I didn't have the fear. I didn't have the self-doubt. I didn't have the indecisiveness I have now. And I'm going, And they go, and I know so much more now than what I did then. And I always ask them, okay, so when you were younger, what did you do? And they say, well, I looked at where I wanted the ball to go. I knew I had a pretty good chance to make it. And I stepped in and I said, okay, let's go. Let's put it there. And I'd say, now what are you doing? Oh, now I'm trying to make sure my stroke is this, it's that. I'm getting sort of bogged down in sort of the mechanics. I'm starting to think about, three putt avoidance, thinking about other things.
The outcome.
Yeah, they get so lost in the externals, and they get lost in the end goal. And I think that's really where the fear in putting comes from. And I'm going to talk about fear as an acronym, FEAR. We create anxiety and anticipatory anxiety when we get over a putt and we start having the fear. And so we're focusing on expectations and the results. That's really where the fear comes from. We're thinking about the past, all the putts that we have missed, or we're projecting into the future about what could happen versus focusing here on the here and now. So in order to get through that focusing on expectations and the results, I say, let's have that fear. Let's use that fear for us. Let's use that energy, turn it around. Let's focus on execution and then accept the result. Because when you focus on execution Execution is much like we used to talk about when we worked with FBI and CIA agents in what we call pistol firing. We would call it reflexive firing. You would just point and shoot. And so the actual reflexive firing is like just looking at the hole, coming back to the ball, and actually rolling the putter, hitting the putter. That's really what little kids do. They don't really go through a lot of self-analysis and self-introspection about how their stroke looks or worried about the evaluations of others. They're totally immersed in the moment of just looking at my ball roll line, looking at my end target, and then just hitting it. So reflexive putting, sort of what we call reactive putting, is simply focusing on execution and staying in your putting process and carrying out that order that your brain gave your body to hit that ball and hit it where you wanted to. And so when we start getting back to that, they go, wow, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So we really have to sort of, I hate to say, we kind of go back to the future. We kind of go back in time to say, okay, this is what we did well. Why can't we do this now and do this here for the next couple of days? And so when they start doing that, they go, man, that makes it a lot simpler. I said, because now you have the physical competency, you have the skill acquisition to make a really solid and purposeful stroke. Now let's free up the mind and become very target focused and very reflexive, very reactive. So when people say, hey, this player is playing out of his mind, he's playing unconsciously, what that means is we're getting out of our cognitive step-by-step sequencing thought process, and we're just letting it run automatically. And that's really what little kids do. They just look and fire, and that's really what we have to do. And that's really what I'm trying to do with all of my professionals and all of my players at any level.
Doc, that leads me sort of into something I was thinking about, and we talk about a lot with some of our students, is they get, they start thinking about the process, and that expectation or over expectation leads to a form of anxiety. So one of the things we look at is the time they spend over the golf ball. So like once they set up to it, you see so many, even good scratch players to golfers that are struggling to break 90, and how can we help them? I find a lot of times those players spend more time over the golf ball versus look at your tour player. Like you're saying, most of those guys sort of have a process in mind that they go through. And then when they get over the ball, it's already like it's instinctive that they pull the trigger. So we see a lot of those players that are struggling, they spend more time over it, then they start thinking, then that expectation, I've got to make this, leads to a form of anxiety versus a positive form of, I got a new opportunity here. So what do you think about the time they spend over the ball, and sort of how do you teach that from your perspective?
No, let's really just take a good look. That's just a fantastic observation, Cody. When you talk about expectations, you're also talking about anticipation. Anticipation is an emotion. Now, when we start talking about desire, like passion, sex, the positive anticipation of sex, that's a positive emotion, right? The positive anticipation of going someplace great to eat. There's a desire there. When we have this anticipation, stepping into a putt, we really want this. We're really excited to make it. However, it also has a double-edged sword. There's the anticipation of, well, what if I miss? What happens if I miss? So there's a suspense built into that anticipation. And much like we talk about anticipation anxiety, it's the same thing that people have in public speaking. They have sort of this activation before they step on stage, this anticipation. Then when they're actually even going to actually say their first couple of words, they have what we call confrontation activation. That's really what players have when they're stepping into a putt. They have this anticipation of, oh, I really want to make this, okay? I'm expected to make this. I'm 3 feet from the hole. But what if I don't make it? And when they're over the putt, they're still cooking, all right, cognitively, all right? And now they're making it a pressure cooker. They're thinking, okay, I have to do this, I have to do that. And so they get lost in all of this mechanical over trying versus this reflexive thinking. So another thing that is, plays right into what you're saying is the fear word, FEAR. We've got to now focus our energy around the routine. Focus the energy around the routine. So when we get in there, we take a look at our target. We know the blade is aligned. We take a last look, come back to the ball. And on that last look, our routine allows us to actually, swing through automatically. So that's how we really get through that fear. And that's how you've got to take players. You have to have them into either a countdown sort of routine or some type of rhythmic flow. But that's really what we do. We've got to get them out of sort of this, what I call this predicting, forecasting, probability thinking over the putt, because that leads to them stalling. That leads to someone becoming ball bound. But let's think about this now. Anticipation is a feeling. It's an emotion. There's judgment. And that's why when I have a player and I'm working with players and with Seymour, what we're trying to do is sort of take all the emotion out, because a putt is a putt is a putt. No matter how you feel about it, what's the most important thing? It's ball contact. It's center of mass from the putter face going to center of mass on the ball. The golf ball doesn't care how much you want it. It doesn't really care, what it's for. It just responds to the physics and dynamics of the hit. So I always like to say it's neutral value putting. No one putt is worth more than another, because when you're starting to put too much value, too much expectation on wanting to make a putt, you're now creating internal pressure. So what we have to do now, prior to the anticipation and prior to the expectation, is get to the realization, hey, I can make this putt. What's my task? And that should be the expectation. What do I need to do? Where does the ball need to go? And once I create a very purposeful putting plan, I'm now going to execute that plan. And I'm going to get in there, align and aim myself, and then I'm going to reflexively swing and hit that putter. And then I have to accept whatever happens. And that's the whole part of the whole putting process as well, because that's where fear resides. It's in our past memory bank. And we've got to also remember, we are what we think we are. We've got to start going back and really pulling back a lot of positive putts, a lot of positive pictures, because what we know is that bad is stronger than good. And for every time you do something good, when something bad or you miss a putt, it takes 5 to 7 times to say, come on, attaboy, attagirl, to get you through that bad stuff, right? Because the bad stuff sticks. And I haven't, for a long time, heard somebody at the 19th hole go, man, I am just making too many putts. I am just making too many putts out there. Somebody slow me down. I'm on fire. But you always hear people talking about around the bar or getting up the guy goes, I just couldn't make any putts. And that is why Harvey Pinnock told Tommy Kite and Ben Crenshaw, when you get out on tour, go out to eat with good putters, because they are always talking about putts, they made, the anticipation of making great putts, going to have a great putting day, because great putting is contagious and poor putting is even more contagious. Wow. So you have to be very, very wary of who you're hanging around, what you're talking about, but you become what you think about most of the time. Thinking about making putts, you start to make putts.
That's awesome. So in a way, what I'm hearing is that in their youth, these players really, they love making putts, but Doc, they probably don't care so much if they miss. They're just not even worried about that. It doesn't really enter their mind. And so that multiple factor that you're talking about accentuating the negative doesn't happen in the youth. And it's positive. It's, I'm going to make every putt. Of course they don't, but that's the mindset. And so what you're saying is once we outgrow that aspect of our youth, that carefree aspect, you need to retrain every golfer to recapture what it was about the youth that made them a better putter.
When we're young, Jim, we are carefree. And let's use that word. We care, but we're free. We care about, what we're doing, but we're free to, to have this emotional freedom to just, be what we want, do what we want. We don't really care what anybody else thinks. But as we get, older, we start to worry more about what people are going to see in us, what their perceptions of us are. So we become careful, and we become so full of care that we actually sort of stifle this freedom to express ourselves. That's really what putting is. When you talk about putting, it's about emotional and psychological freedom. It's being able to step up there going, hey, watch me. All right. And that's what little kids do. They go, Mommy, Daddy, watch me, watch me. And then as kids get older and we learn fear in high school, don't look at me. Don't look. You're starting to really make me nervous. Don't look. All right. And then what happens as we get, more mature, we actually almost learn to become carefree again. We now have learned the competencies through our physical, technical skills. We now believe in that. And so now we're actually going to just keep moving forward. So that's the whole point. I don't want people to become careless, but I think a lot of times people are so full of care, they're careful, that we actually have to have them to be a little bit more careless. You care way too much. You care too much what other people think. You care too much about having the perfect stroke. You care too much about wanting to, reach this 3-putt avoidance stat or whatever it is. I've got to get you falling in love with this putt right now at this moment. And that's really what you should expect. Am I all in on this putt that I'm getting ready to putt right now? And if you are, your mind's probably in a pretty good place.
And what kind of a difference does that make in their golf games? I mean, I'm feeling like this is something that's going to make a significant difference in their game and their improved scores and their enjoyment of the game.
Oh, let me just give you a personal testimonial here. Now, for the listeners and for all of us, I have a beautiful wife. Her name's April Winters. It's kind of like a weather person's name, okay? And now the weather with April Winters. But I gave her, one of the bronze Seymours, and she only plays maybe once every 10 years, all right? And she knows a lot about the game. She hears me talking to the athletes. And she's a very good athlete, when she wants to play. But I asked her one time about, what do you expect, when you step into a putt? And she told me when she first started playing, she goes, I would just step in and my whole focus was, I just really wanted to hit it. I really wasn't even concerned about even making the putt, okay? So I said, the last time we played, I said, you made a lot of putts with that Seymour putter. She goes, yeah. She goes, I just aimed it up and made sure, like the little red dot, was hidden. And I just stepped into it. And I really said, hey, I'm going to make this putt. And by golly, she started making putts. So here's a person, I don't want to say she's a total neophyte, she's a total beginner, but her whole attitude changed. And her success level changed. And she told me, quite explicitly, she goes, that's a great way to think. I just really want to make putts. And she goes, and by me just wanting to step up there and expecting me that I'm going to make this putt, even my misses were better. And I think that's the whole point when we start talking about, well, what should you expect? And I always tell this, and this kind of gets back to what, Ted and Cody and we were all talking about here a few minutes ago. So a tour player comes up and goes, well, what should I expect? Well, you should expect when you step in that you've done all of your homework. You should expect this ball is going to go in the hole. You should expect that the absolute feel that you want to hit this ball. And you should expect that it's going to go in. And they go, well, what if it doesn't go in? Then I have to ask them, did you miss it? Did you miss it well? And they go, miss it well? I mean, either you make it or you miss it. I go, no. I said, a lot of times when a player is really putting super and they're on a hot streak, every putt they look at, whether it's 15 feet or 50 feet, they feel it has a chance to go in. And if they miss it, they miss it well. It had a chance to go in. And then at the end of the day, other tour players will come up and go, wow, It looked like every putt you rolled today was going in. And that is sort of the expectation I want every one of my top level players to get to. I would love to have everybody have that mindset, because if you're going to miss a putt, by golly, at least miss it with the conviction that you're trying to make it. And, we've talked about that before on other shows, but that's the one thing we talk about, what's the one expectation you should have? The expectation, when I step in here, I knew damn well I was going to give that thing a great effort for that ball to go into the hole. I don't have total control over that, and to a certain point, he goes, but I expected it was going to go in. And I still always love the story about Jack Nicklaus playing with Tom Weiskopf back in 1977, where Jack rolls the putt, the ball goes in, and it comes out on the other side. We always see that. We always go, how did that ball get to the other side? It defied the law of gravity. And as they're walking to the 18th tee, Tom Weiskopf, who was sort of Jack's rival at the time, they both played for McGregor, both were Ohio State Buckeyes. He looked at Jack. He goes, wow, I'm sorry that you missed that putt. And Jack was a little bit heated at that time. He looked at Tom and he goes, hey, I didn't miss that putt, Tom. I made that putt. The darn thing, it just didn't happen to stay in the hole. I made that thing. And then Nicklaus, made the putt on the last hole. But see, that's the genius of a Jack Nicklaus. That's the genius of a Tiger Woods. Every time they step into a putt, they expect to make that putt. And even you'll hear Jack, and I've talked with Jack about this many, many years ago when I was the mental game consultant for his Golden Bear developmental tour in Southern Florida. I said, what is it you're thinking of, when you even step in, sort of this anticipatory period that we talk about, stepping into a putt. He goes, well, I never missed a putt in my mind, ever. So, when he's stepping in there, he's really believing he's going to make that putt, which led to another whole discussion about, do you know you're going to make a putt, or do you believe you're going to make a putt? And so that's a whole, that's another putting podcast. But the whole point of it is that, yes, that's really what I expect of my players, is that, hey, I'm expecting to make putts. And it works at the tour level, and it works at, the beginning level. I know it. I have seen it tens of thousands of times. But most importantly, I've seen it with my toughest critic of all, and that is my wife. All right, I've seen her do that. And
I love it.
And if she can do it, I guarantee you, I know it works, because she is the ultimate litmus test. Okay, so I mean, it's wonderful. I say this, in all seriousness, it's amazing to see someone and really just change their mind where it changed their game, that quickly. Because I've always said, the moment you change your mind about something that you're thinking about, and you change it in a positive direction, the thing that you were thinking about tends to change right away as well. So what you think about, you bring about. And that really goes with expectations as well.
What a great podcast today. And I love the simple fact that for April Winters, the rifle scope technology was just a simple trigger that gave her all the confidence in the world to say, hey, there's no reason I'm not making this next putt. And you know what? That leads to fun. It eliminates frustration. And, it can get a golfer of any level headed in the right direction. We really enjoyed this, Dr. Bob. And again, you've been listening to episode 25 of the Putting Couch, brought to you by the Seymour Putter Company's tour team. I'm Jim, along with Cody Hale, Ted Glean, and Dr. Bob Winters. And we know you've enjoyed this episode. Share it with your friends. Because what we're talking about is that mental side of the game. That is the difference between having fun and being miserable. It's the difference between playing great and being dissatisfied. And it all starts with that positive attitude. Doctor, you put us in a great frame of mind. Thank you today.
All right. Thanks for having me. Great to be with you guys.
Always a pleasure, Doc.
See you soon.
We appreciate you joining us. If you haven't subscribed to the show, make sure you do wherever you're listening. Be sure to leave a rating and review, because that's how we get the Putting Couch podcast content in front of more people. Also, take a screenshot and share it on social media and tag us at Seymour Putters or #Team Seymour.